Today we are joined by Seed Artists, a UK team that's rethinking what drones can do for agriculture. Seed Artists have brought together drone expertise, data scientists, agri-tech know-how, and thanks to a recent BV loss permit or permission, they're able to go beyond the usual limits of drone operations. Things from precision spraying, targeted seeding, and real-time monitoring. Seed Artists is now showing how drones can potentially revolutionise the way land is managed and help farmers, landowners, and the industry to open up to new possibilities. I'll have the pleasure to hand you over to our speakers. So we have Andy Sprozon, Marcus Travers, and Aleks Kowalski. So over to you, chaps.
Hi everyone, so I'm Andy and I own a company called Auto Spray Systems. We are trying to sort of introduce routine drone use into the agricultural and horticultural sector, and by that I mean crop spraying and seeding and all manner of use cases like that. One of the founding members also of Seed Artists, and I always try and refer to Seed Artists as like a cooperative. And my dad was a builder and he always worked with people who he could trust. He was a joiner and a carpenter. He would have a friend who was a plumber, an electrician, and a bricklayer, and together they could tackle a project together using all their skill sets. And that's Seed Artists for me. And I'll move on to Aleks now.
No, thanks, Andy. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Aleks Kowalski, a fellow kind of founder of Seed Artists. My background, as Andy said, is not agriculture. It's more in the aviation domain. I've been flying commercially for 20 years at the moment. Been involved in drones for 10 years. Currently a director of the Drone Trade Association, and I've been supporting organisations getting beyond visual line of sight approval. And I'm currently project managing the work we've been doing with DEFRA and the Paludiculture Exploration Fund, which kind of led to a lot of this work coming to fruition in the first place. That's a quick whistle stop of me, and I'll hand over to Marcus Travers.
Hi, everybody. So I'm head of Agri Tech at Anglia Ruskin University's campus in Peterborough. I wasn't originally a member of Seed Artists. I'm a fairly new member of Seed Artists, but I have actually been working with Andy and Autospray since they first started running drone operations in the UK. So we have a long-standing relationship. Our role in this whole thing is to look at things like use cases, the integration into the Agri-Tech Centre, but also more importantly to look at how the legislation and regulation needs to keep up with what we're trying to do.
So yeah, that's us, John.
So Andy, do you want to give a little bit more background as to what it is you want to achieve from today's webinar?
Yeah, sure. I think for us, we're just trying to raise awareness, let people know we're here, but also to offer maybe inspiration to other drone operators that may well have joined the webinar today or who will see it in the future, and just give a bit more information as to some of the things, some of the projects that we're involved with, some of the past sort of successes, and maybe if people want, we can explain a little bit of the route path that we've sort of forged at the moment and where it's going to lead to, but also discuss some very drone specific elements like the beyond visual line of sight element, and then also we want to sort of cover how important we believe training standards are and how we want to maintain the highest professional standards throughout the industry, both now that we're merging drone operations and the agricultural sector. We believe there's certainly a need for people to understand the rules, but also how to operate safely. So yeah, I think that's what our aim is.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit then how you managed to gain the permission for BV loss? What was the steps entailed, and how complicated was it to get this permission?
So I think obviously me and Alex will tackle this together, and I'll give you maybe some practical information on that, and I'll turn to Alex for a little bit more of the technicalities. But for us, we were operating, and we have a 500-meter horizontal distance from where the remote pilot can be and where the drone can go, which it doesn't sound like a long distance, but it is quite far. And if you imagine that 500 meters is in every direction, you've effectively got a 1 kilometer box. But when we sort of got involved with some research and development projects with the Woodland Trust and some private estates up in Scotland, it really highlighted sort of how limiting that distance was. You can see from the background you've got, that was an operation that we did in Scotland. We had to go up the mountain. We broke the axle of a 6-wheel quad bike. Well, it's not a quad bike. We spent most of the day getting up the hill, and it wasn't that much of a distance. It was just our inability to see the drone, over a crest of a hill, for example. But when you're dealing with those relatively steep inclines, those inclines happen over a short distance. You can't see the drone. So how do we tackle that problem? How do we make the machine do the work? That the whole point was to make things safer for people, and the machine does the work, not the people. So that's when we started on that sort of voyage, really, to sort of work away how to do this. And there were some technical challenges, which if I can maybe hand over to Alex to sort of discuss some of those elements and how that fed into how we overcame this challenge.
Yeah, sure. So one of the problems, John, is ultimately with BV loss, you've got to fly your drone as far as you can see it, which is currently limited for majority of operations to 500 meters. What with BV loss is you've got to make a safety argument in 2 areas. Primarily, is it safe to fly over the area where you're flying because you can no longer fly to see it anymore? It's what we call ground risk. And then the second part is, if you can no longer visually see your drone, how do you know it's safe with other airspace users? So what we call the air risk. From a ground risk perspective, that's a little bit more straightforward. The number of people that are going to be, for example, in peatland or over tree canopies, for example, is limited. So that area is slightly more straightforward from our perspective. But from an aviation risk issue, it's how can we be safe and demonstrate that to the regulator that we will not be seeing any other manned aircraft primarily or any crew drones. So that was a combination of making a safety argument, which related to how can Andy's drone be seen by yourself, by members of the public, but primarily from the people who are flying, for example, light aircraft, hang gliders, paragliders, low-level police helicopters. So we fitted a piece of electronic, essentially an electronic beacon that lets you can then see where Andy is, for example, and we demonstrated that recently. The second then part is the Civil Aviation Authority, the aviation regulator. They came out with a new policy, which was around, if you're flying 3 meters from the ground, what is the chance of a large plane being at that height? We hope the answer is pretty much nil. And so therefore it was, can we evidence that? So that was another piece of work that we put together called Data Declare Environment. And then the third part was, how can we get external proof that Andy's flying safely? So he's got something mounted on the drone, great. Does he have something else that he can have, for example, on the ground that sees everyone else around him? So he is being seen, how can he see everybody else? So we developed a bespoke piece of technology which Andy has actually with him on site when he's flying, which then supplements other existing technologies that are out there. For example, if you're flying and you want to see when your loved one's coming into land, we all go on these popular websites, we can track planes. How can we build a local air picture to do the same thing? So those are the 3 areas that we helped Andy to get BV loss, which was, where am I? Where is everybody else? Is it safe to fly where I want to fly? And that was it.
Interesting. And in terms of where seed artists are, have you anybody else in the marketplace that you would see as competitors doing something similar, or is it quite unique to yourselves?
I'll answer from a technical, and I'll let Andy describe some maybe what Autospray does. But technically, right now, as it stands, we're the only operator in the United Kingdom who can fly beyond visual line of sight in this special lower type of airspace. Other operators do have, for example, where if you're flying, there's somebody who can visually see it as well, maybe like a relay thing. But at the moment, as it stands in the UK, Andy's the only one. I'm sure that will change, but from an agricultural perspective, no, Andy's unique at the moment, which is great from a kind of vendor perspective, but it also means that we're pushing the boundaries faster than everyone else. And as Andy will get to, that's great from an aviation perspective. But if you haven't got the agriculture piece, the spraying bit that goes with it, that's just a bit of a problem, which, you know, I'm sure some of the people on here will have heard drones were mentioned 10 years ago as this next big, great technological thing. And that hasn't necessarily come to pass. So the question is why and how we're developing on that. Andy, over to you.
Yeah. So from a practical drone operation perspective, there are other organisations with a beyond visual line of sight capability, but their emphasis is more, let's say, a linear inspection, inspecting a power line or a railway, for example. And also with us, we do not have a stated limit distance-wise, which is when you're putting, it's hard when you try and put that into perspective. It's really difficult to think that we could fly that drone, which weighs 120 kilos. It's 3 meters by 3 meters. It could carry a payload with pesticides in, for example. We're only limited as far as our connectivity is limited. If we've got a signal 10 kilometers away, we could fly 10 kilometers away within the scope of the safety agreement and arrangement that we have with the CAA. The permission is site specific. So we have to identify the site and get that approved by the CAA each time we intend to fly. And there's a few other things we need to as well, but I won't go into that because it's quite technical. Yep. But those locations, for example, could be thousands and thousands of hectares in size, or it could be 2 hectares. It all depends on your capability to see it. So that's what is quite significant, and we're going to be doing a lot of peatland restoration and woodland creation, reforestation over the winter period, and it's going to transform how we work. We did an operation in another site in Scotland. It took us maybe 3.5 hours to get to the location, and that was nearly an hour's drive off road. And the final 2 hours wasn't passable with normal 4x4 vehicles, so we had to lease a forestry sort of forwarder, which is like a tracked vehicle. We had to lift the drone on, load the drone onto the back, walk up the hill. I fell over a couple of times. Someone nearly broke my leg. Someone else fell. It was all dangerous. Recently felled area with pits and logs everywhere. And then when we got to the site, we seeded an area that was a hectare. We did it slow, and it took us about 12 minutes.
Okay.
And when we loaded up the drone again, back down the hill again, another 2+ hours, reloaded the vehicles, off-road again for another hour. So it was a full day to do just about a hectare worth of work. So like 12 minutes of work.
Andy, sorry, are we able to ask questions as we go along?
If I would prefer if you pop them into the chat, if that's okay.
It's saying it's turned off.
Christina, would you be able to turn it back on?
There's a particular point I wanted to ask about that site-specific authorization.
I just put a message into the chat, so it's just the usual chat.
Since you're online, why don't you ask the question?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Thank you, John. Andy, that sounds quite extreme, and I did watch the video, and it looks excellent and a great use case, as you say. Albeit that it's quite high effort to get there, but the reality is you can get the job done. You said there that it was site specific for the BVLOS. Now, most of us will be contractors. We may be going to repeat sites, but the vast majority, I would assume, will be first-time visits. We'll do all the necessary under our operational authorization. Is it a case, if I'm understanding correctly, but for BVLOS, it will be site specific because of the inherent risk. But I understand that if we're just talking about more ordinary visual line of sight plus MI, that that won't be site specific. Do you follow my question?
Yeah. So for to operate in the atypical environment beyond visual line of sight, it's location specific. So, but once that location is agreed, you don't need to get reauthorization. You just need to submit a NOTAM and repeat. So you do need to be careful in terms of what is commercially viable for a beyond visual line of sight location. With peatland restoration, the whole area will be working on that for 10 years or more. So it's really, you know, it's commercially, it's a powerful commercial tool. But if you're, trying to think of an example, you know, if you've got a farmer who's asked you to do some cover cropping and it's a one-time thing, then it is not commercially viable, and then it'll work to just do that as we would do. We're location agnostic in terms of visual line of sight, and there's always.
Sorry, just to jump in there, but that could be done on a operational authorization SORA Sale 2, for example, without the VLOS.
Yeah.
And therefore it wouldn't have to be site specific. As long as you were within that containment and had the same risks, it would be seen as a rural location. I'm maintaining all the air risk are the same as my submission and authorization.
Yeah, so we run two permissions. We've got a visual line of sight permission, which we've held for nearly 5 years now, and the beyond line of sight one is a separate entity.
Yeah,
which we manage separately.
Which I guess, you know, for the specialist, the job like you've described. Yeah.
If it helps, Andy, I've got a small video that I can show which just demonstrates to those in the room kind of what we mean when we talk about visual line of sight. So this is the one. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Just load it up. Yeah. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
So what you're looking at here, for example, is essentially, and I'll press play in a second, but the idea is this is one particular site we've got for peatland. And let's say, for example, what you're looking at here from a scale perspective, where my mouse is here, I'll move around gently. From that point there to the end point there is about 1.8 kilometers. So conventionally, you can only fly to where my mouse is, about 500 meters, under the majority of permissions. What BVLOS allows us to do, and I'll press play, is to actually potentially operate a lot further in one particular go, which unlocks from a distance, and as Andy said, from a range perspective, a lot more applications. This is a demonstration just for this particular video clip of how far one could fly potentially, and actually what BVLOS means from a kind of visual see it rather than just talk about it. So that's the main thing I wanted to kind of demonstrate.
No, that's useful.
Thank you.
I guess, just sorry, without labouring the point, I suppose my final thing is how practical is it for to you know pick up an inquiry for a new job, apply for the site specific, get that authorization, and then proceed with the work? What is that? A lot of legwork, a lot of heavy lifting, or is it a case of going online, the new tools, and adding that detail and getting sort of getting an update on authorization within 48 hours, for example?
It's not quite as simple as that. There is a fair bit of legwork to do, but we have a template which we follow, which pulls us through that process. And we're as quick as the CAA. So I think they suggested that there could be a 28-day turnaround for a request. It would largely depend on the complexity of the location. You know, are you in the middle of nowhere, and is it just Class G airspace? Are there any other airspace users nearby? You know, and it would be basically demonstrating your understanding collaboration with those users. So ensuring that you can demonstrate you've spoken to them and you've engaged with them, and you may well have agreed a set of procedures that you both will always follow in the event that you're operating beyond visual line of sight. You know, like common rules.
Andy, is there an appetite? Have you seen an appetite for your technologies from growers or from landowners? Is there something there which you think, there's an absolute need for this technologies?
Are we talking beyond line of sight, or are we talking?
Yes.
Yeah. So beyond line of sight, Definitely, yeah. This has been coveted as what we said, that the holy grail in drone operations for more than 10 years. And for us, this was always all commercially driven. There's no, there is an end user at the end of this, and we're getting a lot more, and the possibilities have been opened. Referring back to peatland restoration again, we've been told that every hectare that they restore traditionally, i.e. even just on foot, they damage roughly another hectare. And it's like this progressive rolling back of like the enemy line, as it were. But for us, we can just skip over that and just treat that single area.
And how many drones do you envisage that you will require for certain tasks? I mean, is it, in when you've got vast hectares, is it possible to do it with half a dozen? What kind of numbers are we talking about here?
It largely depends on the. I'm going to hit you with a question now. It all depends on the application and the application rate. If we're doing, I'm just trying to think. If we're doing like some seeding, we won't really need that many drones because the application rate is relatively light. You can traverse those distances and manage those expectations. It's all about your logistics on your ground site, charging batteries and efficiently filling the drone. And there's a balance between filling the drone up all the way up, tank-wise, and filling it fully laden, which would be quite an efficient process if you were flying nearby. But then when you're flying further away, there's a bit of trial and error in sort of figuring out, do I fill this tank enough to sort of apply just to 1 hectare? You use more battery, get into the site if it's heavier, and there's a fine balance. With heavier applications, if you've got, let's think like liquid nitrogen, liquid fertilizer applications, which could be quite intensive per hectare, then the advantage then you'd really, to cover large sites, you'd really want to be operating sort of multiple platforms at the same time, which is one of our focuses is going forward, because we don't believe we will match the horizontal boom sprayer by any means. We want this to be the most efficient sort of alternative tool in the box, and give those growers, give those farmers more options, which in turn gives our contractors more options.
Yeah, I think we'll come on to the pesticide specific area in a minute, if that's okay. And just you mentioned you had a video of one of your drones to give people maybe who are not so familiar a view of what it is we're talking about. Would you be able to play that video? Is that on the spot?
Sure. No problem. Let me just share my window.
If it's all right, John, I'm answering certain questions in the chat that I can
answer. No, that's brilliant. I can see. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, can everyone see that? Okay, my screen.
Yeah.
So it's just a short sort of 90 seconds, just showing you the size of the drone and some of the operations that we were doing. This was in Scotland, and that was the vehicle that I mentioned that we used to get up to the hill. This was like a rewilding, reforestation project for the Woodland Trust up in Scotland. And this is the hectare that we applied to. It's a drone coming into land. But as you can see, it's a significant piece of kit. This isn't something you can pick up and carry up the side of that mountain if you need to do a project. You really do need to be mechanized with a vehicle. When we couldn't get up there, we've got 4x4 pickups. We couldn't get up there because of all the brash. It's a recently felled area. And here's an example of how that shot just there. On this project, we were limited to 500 meters. So what I did is I located myself on foot 400 meters up the hill, and that enabled us to sort of reach the further areas of the operation. And this is a smaller drone that we used a couple of years ago to seed another site. And you saw the quad bike, that was just before it broke. So we had to carry all that all downhill. And it doesn't look that big. It may not look that heavy. And I'm sure we could all lift 40 kilos of weight. But when you're carrying it down a mountain, and it's sort of relatively sensitive equipment as well, you don't want to, and it gets heavy very
No,
quick.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
And moving on to the pesticide specifics. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about what the work that you're doing here and your engagements with authority holders, so companies that actually are responsible for labels, etc. What work have you been doing?
Yeah, no problem. So when we first looked at heavy lift agricultural drone operations back at the end of 2019, my other business is where we train drone pilots. We're a recognised assessment entity for the CAA, and that gives you sort of a nice overview of the marketplace, and you can see, you know, what a lot of people are doing. And in the build up to the end of 2019, we saw a big change in the industry from individual operators becoming sort of absorbed by big business. You know, you may have like drone teams within a business as opposed to subcontracting to an SME, for example. But also we could see a lot of the specialist permissions were always around trying to fly further, or for like linear inspections, trying to fly closer to people, fly closer to assemblies of people, you know, to film like concerts and things, you know, obviously, and also a little bit higher. And there was only 1 or 2 people who were operating heavier than 25 kilo, and their focus was for the filming industry, you know, to lift bigger equipment to film. We couldn't see anyone dropping any articles that we were aware of at the time. We couldn't see any activity or real strong activity in the crops spraying area. We're aware of a special interest group that had been set up a couple of years prior to that, but we weren't aware of any progress that had been made. So when we started this, we were told by that special interest group and a few other people at the time that we're wasting our time, we're wasting our money. It's going to be 10, 15 years before you get anywhere on this project. And yeah, you know, so we just sort of engaged with the regulator. We've never, our process
With
is
CRD.
Yeah, like what we do with the CAA, we do not sort of shy away from engaging with them in the first instance. And obviously we recognise the HSE and the Chemicals Regulation Director. So we saw, what do you need from us? What can we do to make this a reality? And they told us, the first major thing is regulatory standard drift data. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so they came back and told us what we needed to do. So we engaged with other private industries to figure out a specific protocol for that and what we need to do. They came back and it took us another 18 months to develop that protocol. When we wanted to run something that the CRD didn't turn around and say, oh, I wish you'd just done that one more time, or I wish you'd just done that one more thing to sort of, well, you know, and not waste all that time and effort and money. So we developed all that, we run the trials, and then we started to engage with the chemical manufacturers at the same time. We're not a chemical manufacturer. Our specialty is certainly not formulations and pesticide knowledge in that sense. But we're trying to bring these two worlds together, collide these two worlds and bring it to a commercial reality. The arrangement we have with the HSEs to undertake trials first, and the reason for that is so that the HSE can review all the data packages and do a full risk assessment of that product that we want to apply. We need consent from the chemical manufacturer to do that, and we basically merge our data with their data, and out comes a trial permit. Mm-hmm. Within that trial permit, it's slightly different than the regular trial permit that yourself or other professionals in the industry. They may see a trial as a small trial plot where it could be 10 by 10 meters, you know, just to test the effectiveness and the efficacy of that product. Whereas for us, we're introducing an industrial level new novel application method where we need much bigger spaces, and there's also a lot of learning. We're not using a boom sprayer that's been used for however many years. There's a lot of learning to do. There's a lot of
training, I imagine, as well, Andy. I guess the requirements to be able to apply using a drone is very, very different to, let's say, a spray operator using a spray tractor. So, are the training requirements as stringent?
At the moment, within the realms of a trial permit, no, industry standard. So, for example, your PA1 or your knapsack qualification. And that was a big sort of leap by the HSE and a show of faith and trust in not only the current sort of training standards, but also like bridging or extrapolating across from, well, someone's got to fill a knapsack, so they'll know the operator exposure risks for filling a knapsack. And that translates to refilling the drone X amount of times. And okay, you apply at distance, but those sort of core principles remain the same. But from an application perspective, yes, we've had to, clearly define exactly what we're going to do. How high are we going to fly from the crop? What's the maximum wind sort of factor we're going to operate in, which we've just copied from the regulations, no change there. But what's our forward speed? What's our droplet size? What's the mass of the drone? What's the downwash measured at? All these variables we've had to sort of try and encompass into our spray drift data, and then out at the end gives us what we call a buffer zone. We're after how far do these droplets drift? How far can we remain from other non-target areas? How far do we need to keep from water areas? All those things they're the main considerations.
Is there a limitation to the size of the fields that you can operate in if you have these buffer zones of, I think you said 7 meters? So is there a minimum size that you're required in order to use a drone?
No. Our spray width is 4 meters.
Okay.
Give or take. So, we're not going to be able to apply, we are not precision agriculture by any stretch of the means. And people do tend to associate drones with that. But the precision is in the positional capabilities of the drone. Yeah, we can position ourselves to 0.1 centimeters, but spraying wise, we're 4 meters swath width, and we're in the air. So there's only so much we can do. Wind will take over. There is drift. And we've always been super open and honest about that. It's not precise. It has a job to do, and it won't replace the effectiveness of a boom spray, especially on broad acre. But it offers an alternative that can bridge that gap when a farmer can't get the machinery onto the land, and it can be like an essential stopgap for whatever it is, whether it's tackling flea beetle or blight or reseed, spot spraying onto blackgrass. They're just
in terms of your ambitions here, and again, I'll go back to the scalability of the operations. If you're looking at applications of crop protection inputs, then one would imagine that you would require quite a few drones.
Yeah. I mean, our aim is to go through this, obtain trial permits, and then after that, obtain commercial authorizations. Whether that follows an extension for minor use, where we sort of sidestep efficacy, and it's like what we used to call like an off-label approval. So the application is at the grower's risk. Will that be a commercial authorization, or we amend the label, or some process like that with the manufacturers direct? Yeah, and then like you say, after that, water rates could be a hindrance. Most products are always at 200 litres a hectare. So I suppose that's 4 flights a hectare. That may be something around 15 to 20 minutes per hectare at those water rates. So I suppose that the long-term project would be, after commercial authorizations, then we look at lowering the water rates. But as you can imagine, that is a major piece of work, and that is outside our wheelhouse massively, and that would be wholly reliant on the chemical manufacturer wanting to do that. But I think only once we've demonstrated commercial viability through commercial authorizations will that be something considered.
Thank you. And Marcus, bringing you into the conversation here in terms of the training, could you tell us a little bit about what's required from a training perspective, the length of the courses, etc.?
Well, the truth of the matter is that some of the training is still in development because the operations are still in development, but we're working very closely again with the HSE and other organisations such as Neuroso and Basis and Lantra to make sure that we're ready when the operations are more widely available. As you would expect with any sort of spray operation, there's the practical elements to it, and part of that practical element has to be the piloting and good quality piloting and good quality training and monitoring of piloting. But then there's the spray aspects to it, and Andy and I, Andy in particular, have been working on a new spray certificate, a new PA, specifically for drone applications. So that when there are wider permissions available, then people can be trained as an add-on to normal drone applications. Because of course, if you're spreading seed and non-toxic things, then there's no need to have these extra bits of training. You can do that purely with the drone training. However, you are still subject to certain environmental legislations, even if you're spreading things like seed, particularly if you're straying into SSSI areas and what have you. So it's not true to say that you can just go and do any operation anywhere just because you've been trained to use a drone and you're not going beyond visual line of sight. There are still restrictions that you need to be aware of, but they're less obvious than maybe the ones around pesticide. Fertilizer, of course, that has its own restrictions with training, and we're working with Basis around facts and the safe application of fertilizers. But the main area is that we're working quite hard on is beyond just the operations, is about, first of all, the CPD. So if you're a spray operator, you'll have to enter into a Neuroso scheme of some sort that relates to drone operations, and there'll be specific CPD associated with that. And then, of course, you've got the advisory aspects around spraying. So that includes, obviously, the various aspects of Basis. So that could be in an agricultural setting, but it could quite easily be in an amenity or forestry setting as well. Now, we're working very closely with Basis, as I said, and the HSE. What we're doing as an interim step, what we've agreed to do with HSE CRD, is that we're going to be running a course, probably end of September, beginning of October, that kind of time, as a way of upskilling existing Basis registered advisors. Now, it will be open to others as well as a more general sort of information day. But the idea is to give those who are Basis registered and I guess facts registered could come into that as well, the heads up of about the more of the specifics around what is good and bad practice and what is allowed and not allowed, or going to be allowed and not going to be allowed. And what we're hoping is that event will be it will be a precursor to a full Basis add-on module. But what we're hoping is that people who attend that will get some acquired prior learning dispensation against that module, so they're not having to do the training twice. So hoping that stepping stone will be taken into account when they then do the full Basis add-on module, if they should wish to do so. That, as I said, that they're not doing the same training twice. Thank you.
And are you looking to what's happening around the globe in terms of drone technologies and applications? Could you give some insight into what's happening in other areas, in particular Europe as our close cousins, and we look to align a little bit more closely with Europe?
I mean, from pushing the boundary point of view, in some ways we are ahead of the game. But in other areas, the Europeans are being more proactive. But it's interesting that really, if you're looking to best use practice, then you're probably going back to where a lot of these drones are manufactured in China. They were manufactured for use in paddy fields and things like that, which are hard to get a tractor on. Yeah, it's a no-brainer why you would use a drone on a terraced paddy field. Yeah, but again, in America, there are a lot of instances now where people are turning away from even boom sprayers to using clusters of spray drones. Purely, well, two reasons. First of all, they don't rely on diesel directly. They're electric powered. So you've got a way of potentially decarbonising your operations very quickly, or at least some of them. But also, again, in America, you're talking about farms that are much, much bigger. So you're driving your sprayer a long, long way before you actually get it in the field and it's spraying. Whereas you can put several drones on a pickup and do the same journey in a fraction of the time. So this is another thing. It's not just about inaccessible land, it's about scale as well. And bizarrely, the bigger the scale you are, then actually drones are more inviting because you can drive them around more quickly. You're not having to trundle along in a large spray unit to get somewhere. You can get there much more quickly, get through the operations, and then get back.
Fantastic. Just looking to the time, so we've got 10 minutes left. I'd like to maybe open up to some Q&A. I can see we've got some questions in the chat. Does anybody in the room would like to open up their mic and ask a question directly, or drop it into the chat? Christine, I don't know if you can monitor if we can see any hands raised. As people are building up the courage to maybe ask a question. On the safety aspect, especially aerial application with crop protection, so with pesticides, in the current situation, if a sprayer breaks down, then it sits in the field. Obviously, with a drone sprayer, if something goes awry, then obviously there is some risk of it crashing outside of where it's intended. Are there any safety concerns? What are you doing in this space to ensure that you mitigate any sort of accident as much as possible?
I mean, it's a main area that we have worked with, both with the CAA and the HSE, and excuse me, we have satisfied them to date that we are mitigating that as much as we possibly can and minimising that risk. And there's sort of like two elements to it. We've got 4 sort of areas to measure sort of height and positional, sort of where we are in a point in space. We've never had any incidents where the drone has left its operating area, both in the UK. I've got non-disclosure agreements with the manufacturer as well and the CAA, and we're able to demonstrate there's been no times where the drone has left its field of operation globally. But also, it is a valid point. So yeah, if there is an incident, let's say there's a malfunction and the drone does exit its area because it's crashing and it does hit some water, for example, and that is a concern. However, when you're filling a 1,000-litre sprayer and they're driving on roads and past waterways, they could have an incident just as easily. And like I say, it's that balance. Would you rather 50 litres go into the waterway or 1,000? You know,
Neither.
Neither. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was just going to add, there's one of the things that Andy's not mentioned is their attention to detail around useful service life of parts as well. It's you know, if you take the same attitude to a drone as you would to any aircraft, whereby you don't let things fail, you replace them within a reasonable timescale, then you minimise that risk. But also, it's and one of the things that we're working with Andy and Alex on is understanding complexity in the landscape, understanding what it is out there that could increase the risks, such as bodies of drinking water, but also, again, mentioning triple SIs, which they're less obvious sometimes than say roadways or buildings, but there are maps of them out there, and it's making sure that their operators are aware that that information is out there and can be accessed, and they can take that into consideration when they're planning their flight paths.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
I think one area that's worth mentioning as well is, I'm going to call it change management. If I go to a farmer and say, I can do all this amazing stuff, and it will, you've got to take a gamble, it should pay off, and it'll cost you you'll save 10%. Is that enough for a farmer to want to change? Or do you have to make a very solid cast iron argument that it's going to be 20, 30%? The change management is minimal, that we bring people on the journey. So one of the reasons for this kind of webinar isn't just to get technical about the drones, it's the so what. Drones can do all this stuff, they can fly BVLs. What's the return on my investment? What's the change that I'm going to have to introduce? How do I share an asset, for example, like Andy's drone? So for me, it's much more around kind of proving that financials stack up. Because I've got my hand up, I'm a Clarkson's Farm kind of watcher. So how do I see that and go, right, how do I create change that farmers can adopt, bring in, that's not going to cost them a lot of money, but also they can see end use and results? So I think these are kind of stepping stones to get to that point. But I think it's the return on investment for me that I think is really important, which is what we're definitely working as well as part of our Paludiculture project with DEFRA.
Yeah, absolutely. The benefits for the farmer, absolutely. Can I bring in Mark Hill?
Yep, just take myself off mute. Yeah, thanks, guys. That's very interesting. I put a couple of questions or so in the chat, but you're talking about the global picture. I mean, this isn't something that Andy or Alex has built in their shed, some Heath Robinson sort of machine, and having to explain what this sort of dark matter is to the CAA. This is tried and tested. There must be tens of thousands of these units around the world being used successfully, and that's great to hear. And I see examples around the world, South America, Australia, North America, you've named them, where policymakers are saying, hey, this is a great thing. There is a cost benefit. There is a return on investment. A small cooperative can afford to buy one of these, and maybe not $500,000 worth of John Deere, and is saying, but our policy doesn't allow for this. But hey, we're going to get together and have some joined up thinking. Are you seeing an appetite, a change in the mood to sort of incorporate that? I mean, there's moving parts. We've obviously got CA in terms of airspace, and then we've got CRD in terms of what and who and how and that type of thing. Is it becoming more joined up, and what's your confidence about when?
So for us, this is at the moment, the HSA are saying to us that they are reactive. So they're not a proactive regulator in that sense. They will react to data that you submit or an application that you submit. So we're aggressively submitting applications as often as we possibly can to push this forward. The way that translates across the pond to the EU, we're going to be, we're going through something called an EU reset, where we're going to be sort of following in line with the EU regulations a bit more closely. And we are seeing some traffic from other regulators in Europe contacting us, asking if we'd be willing to share our data with them so they can make informed decisions. You've got Germany taking a slightly different approach, where they've approved certain products in certain use cases for drones, commercial use. France, I believe, are looking at something similar, and we're working with them on slug pellets. And I think you mentioned when, or someone's just asked, like, when do we see a commercial approval coming through? So following on from that, we've got a couple of trial permits already. We're due another 9 this month. One of them is going to be a glyphosate-based product that we will be applying onto bracken. But following on from there, we are working through some Areto standard efficacy at the moment, and the routes that we've taken, we hope will have the approval by the end of the year. So that'll be the first commercial approval, and that's a pesticide. We're doing the same with biocides as well for glass cleaning in the horticultural sector. So that would be something, again, another commercial approval linked to the drone, linked to sort of algae removal on glass.
Well, that's great news, and we'll keep fingers crossed for that, because that really will change the landscape for other people to follow suit, with a range of products that they can apply. Thank you.
Yeah, our business is not, we're not an individual operator, and our interest is not specific crop protection, as it were. You know, we're not a contractor. We're not going to go out and do contract work. We import the drones, as we mentioned, from China. We have an operator sort of model where we're enabling operators to go and operate under a tight training regime. And our interest is gathering that data to support those commercial approvals, and that would be our IP and our value going forward would be ownership of those labels, ownership of data.
No, thank you. I know we're short on time. Just quickly,
We are.
I'm interested.
Very quickly, come on, Mark.
In the case of conventional sprayers, is it the manufacturer that leads this work, or is it a contract operator that's led that work? So let's imagine there's a new tractor manufacturer, another colour tractor for the first time seen, and they want to spray those products. Does the manufacturer lead that, or does the company that wishes to use it?
A very short answer, if we can, Andy. We are running out of time.
I'm trying to think of a quick answer.
I could probably give a quick answer.
Yeah, yes and no. Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is why are the manufacturers not leading some of this work? But anyway, that's
Well,
yeah. So, with one eye on the clock, it is unfortunately all we've got time for today. But before we wrap up, I would like to very much thank our three speakers, Andy, Marcus, and Alex, for giving their insight today. If you'd like to learn more about membership for Agri TechE and keep up to date with our future events, then please do check out their website. I think, Christina, you will drop the link into chat. We'd also really appreciate if you would be able to complete the feedback form from within the link. There we go, the link's in the chat. And this will help us shape our future agendas and what our members and delegates want to see. And just to note that if you are an Agri TechE member, then you'll be able to watch the recording later under your area in your account. So with that, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us today. Hope to see you all again soon, and enjoy the rest of your day. Many thanks, everybody.